Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon for all of you. My name is Adria Duarte. I'm the coordinator of the International Observatory on Participatory Democracy. And I'm pleased to welcome you all to this virtual peer learning session that we are organizing with the support of the UCLG Learning Team. First of all, some technical information. Today we will have a session in English without translation. The session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be in the record, don't turn on your camera. And we will be sharing this record in our website later. Please keep your microphones turned off while someone else is speaking. After each presentation, we'll give you a very small space to take the floor for questions. And at the end of the session, of course, you will be able to take the floor. And we really invite you to use the chat also to make questions to the speakers. Today, we're going to learn about deliberative processes like citizen assemblies in 3 different cities, in 3 big capitals. We have examples from Brussels, Milan, and Bogota. Each of the participants will have about 10 to 15 minutes to make their presentations. And at the end, as I said, at the end of each presentation, you will be able to ask them direct questions. The aim of this peer learning session is to help to disseminate how citizen participation is implemented in order to improve democracy, the well-being of populations and the state of our cities and territories, as well as to jointly address the challenges of participatory processes. Without further ado, I will give the floor to the colleagues from Brussels. So Jonathan Moskovic, please, you have the floor for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adria. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm also very happy to be able to do my presentation with Milano and Bogota, which are cities with a lot of inspiration for us and to the rest of the world. So I'm very happy to be here. And so I'll introduce you the Brussels deliberative committees. If Elisa, you can go to the next slide. I'll tell you more about Brussels to start with. So it's especially when you compare it to Bogota and Milano, it's a small city, 1.2 million inhabitants. We have 19 districts, and it might be interesting to say in the different districts in Brussels there are some citizen assemblies as well. Not in all of them, but it's starting in different districts, and there are more and more that are initiating their own processes. Brussels is a very specific city because it is a capital not only of Belgium but of different entities. So from the European institutions, from Flanders. So Flanders is the Flemish-speaking part, the northern part of Belgium, and the French-speaking community. Another interesting thing, especially if you are thinking about launching more, for example, a global assembly or launching a citizen assembly in a more diverse place, it's the second most cosmopolitan city in the world after Dubai, which means you need to think about inclusion, different languages, different people with different backgrounds. And also, Brussels is the first permanent mixed assembly and also the first permanent climate assembly. And you'll hear more about permanent climate assemblies with Milano next. So the key figures of the Brussels deliberative committees. It has been established in 2020. So as I said, it's the first parliament in the world, not the first parliament in the world with permanent committees, which was the case in Belgium in Belgium as well, but with mixed committees. And I'll tell you more about the mixed aspect later in the presentation. In order to start with those deliberative committees, it took more or less 1 year of preparation. So what we decided to do, it's quite different from other places. We decided to walk the talk, basically, and to say, let's not do the design, outside design by expert, but let's take the expertise from the members of parliament and let's co-create the design. So basically for 1 year, the majority members of parliament, but also the ones in the opposition, they were having on a weekly or 2-weekly basis expert hearings. And on the basis of those expertise, they were deciding whether or not they would go for that kind of design, that kind of information, that kind of, I don't know, defrayal or follow-up. So this was a very important moment. The final design, I like the image of a famous Belgian activist in terms of deliberative democracy, David Farrellbrook, who wrote Against Elections. Usually he calls the Brussels deliberative committees a bit the gin and tonic of the citizens' assemblies, because you take 1/4 of members of parliament and you add to that the tonic, 3/4 of citizens, and they are randomly selected. So far, we had 6 deliberative committees, and I'll have a slide on that, but on a very wide range of areas of topics. Maybe I can only say here, I should add that there are 2 ways for the agenda setting. Either those are the 1,000 inhabitants in Brussels that are submitting a topic through our online, or it's also possible offline in terms of inclusion platform. Either way, members of parliament can also introduce a topic. And so far we had 3 citizens and 3 members of parliament. And also very important to say, so it started in Brussels and it's going to spill over to other parliaments. So the southern part adopted, basically they copy-pasted it, and they had so far 1 deliberative committee. And on the national level as well, they will have deliberative committees. So there will be elections now. So after the elections, at least they adopted the legislative bill in order to start it in the next mandate. Next, please. Yeah, I wanted to highlight, because in 15 minutes it's a huge challenge, but some key features of the deliberative committees. The first one is, it's an important one, and it's a very tough word to use, but it's the institutionalization. And so the idea, it's permanent. We changed basically the rules of the parliament. So next to the discretional standing committees, we have those mixed deliberative committees, which is very important also because we know that we have currently a very progressive coalition that might, the results of the elections lead to another kind of coalition. We still have it because it's part of the internal regulations of the parliament. Inclusion, as I said, Brussels is a very diversity, so it's very important, and we have many different measures in order to allow everyone to be part of the process. For example, 1/3 of Brussels inhabitants, they don't have the right to vote. So what we decided to do is also to allow people from the first day they're registered in a city, in a district in Brussels, for them to be able to be randomly selected. The mixed approach, the gin and tonic approach. So for us, it was very important to add members of parliament to the design. So basically, if you would be a person coming from outside the outside world, you would have some troubles in order to distinguish the citizens and the members of parliament. At every single stage, we try to have the same rights and the same opportunities for citizens and MPs. It's not working at stages, but might there be questions on that? I'll be glad to answer those. Number 4 is very important, the follow-up. I've been working for more than a decade in this field, and I've been or designing or observing many citizen assemblies. They were like, the design was great, the dynamics were great, but there was no single follow-up. So what we decided to do, if you look at the internal rules of the parliament, there's a real description, detailed description. It's, I think, 5 or 6 pages explaining what's happening in the 6 or 9 months after the adoption of the report of the deliberative committee. And so there is a mandatory follow-up, which doesn't mean that when we invite the citizens, the randomly selected citizens, 6 or 9 months later, all the recommendations are adopted, but at least the parliament and the government, they have to explain recommendation after recommendation what they decided to do, or if not, why. So to explain why a recommendation was not followed up. 5th, very important as well, evaluation. So because it's permanent, after every single deliberative committee, through questionnaires or working groups with members of parliament, we evaluate them, and there have been a lot of adaptations since the first deliberative committee till the 6th one, because basically the first deliberative committee was worked on a theoretical point of view, but then there was practice, and there's always a big difference between practice and theory. So it was important to adapt to those gray zones we encountered. Next slide, please. So I see that I have 5 minutes left, but I'll focus on the lessons learned and the political recommendations. So as I said, in fact, the fact it's a permanent process, we can bring adaptations from one citizen assembly to another, which is very important. And for example, we noticed that because it's part of the rules of the parliament, the members of parliament, they can use all their parliamentary tools, for example, amendments at the end of the process, which could not work in a citizen assembly process. So for example, we added 1 day in order for those amendments to become observations, and then there are deliberations on those observations to see if the members of parliament, they still keep it, or they can ask citizens to support it, or for example, if they delete it because it's useless after the deliberation. Permanence as routine is important as well. What I mean by that is, for example, when members of parliament started with the deliberative committees, it was very difficult for them to know how they had to behave during a deliberative committee. They were way too active, and then it was not good for the power dynamics, or it was also possible for them to remain very silent and then to try to have their say at the end of the process through amendments or through the vote. So they are learning through practicing, so that's important. We've been noticing when you ask to the citizens, but also to the members of parliament, that it's a real added value, because the members of parliament, they also become ambassadors of the process. And so they're really working hard after those 6 or 9 months, because there's not only the political pressure, but only the symbolic pressure. They know the citizens, they know the information, they know where the recommendations are coming from. And so they're really fighting in order for the recommendations to be translated into public policies. A very important time, and that's something we really should think about for the next deliberative committees. There's a big difference between a citizen assembly timing and the political timing. I have an anecdote for that. For example, the first deliberative committee was on 5G implementation in Brussels. And so 9 months later, we invited the citizens to hear what happened with the different recommendations. And then the minister basically had nothing to say, because in policy cycle timing, 1 year is nothing. So nothing happened. So if you would have asked the citizens at that moment, are you happy with the results? They would have said no. It was, we have the impression to have wasted our time. But 1 year later, this very same minister introduced a 5G bill in Brussels, and 90% of the recommendations were translated into that bill. So N+2, the result would have been very different. So there's a challenge in informing the citizens about the follow-up even after the follow-up session, but also there's this challenge to have like the genealogy of the recommendations, and in which way it will be translated in the next years, because even within 5 or 10 years, we could imagine that some recommendations are followed up. So that is a very important lesson learned. And then very important as well, the involvement of administration. As I said, it's part of the routine of the parliament now, but politicians, they come and go, but the administration, it stays. So it's very important for them to be trained and to take ownership of the process and to be actively involved. So for example, what we decided to do, we have a scientific committee, and the persons in charge of that scientific committee at the administration, and they are the link between the daily work of the citizen assembly and more the political branch. So they're also preparing all the follow-up and things like that. Basically, they became like as an operator would be for the parliament. So they're very skilled now after having organized 6 deliberative committees. Political recommendations. Some things we should do, for example, or should avoid in order to improve the process. Citizenship leave, I think that's major thing, and I think not only for Belgium, but for the entire world. So say, for example, instead of organizing citizen assemblies in the evenings or in the weekends, we could launch a real status for the citizens, and it could be a parallel system as, for example, the justice system where we have randomly selected citizens. Those citizens would get a citizenship leave and could take part in citizen assemblies during the day instead of working, which would be key, I think. Politicians, it's important, instead of having them as observers or at the end of the process. I think I like to take the climate convention in France. They were completely out of the process, and so they didn't feel any ownership, and it was the citizens versus the politicians. I think in our design, it's very important to have them throughout the process, also to not only to increase the follow-up of the recommendations, but also because it has an impact of the way politicians see their own job and the way they work and collaborate with, for example, as a majority member of parliament with the opposition. It's another dynamics than the usual majority versus opposition way of working in the parliament. We see the need for follow-up and also detailed follow-up. And there's this challenge, as I said, about the lesson learned. How do you do with different timing between the citizen assembly timing and the political one? And last but not least, the link with Maxi Public. So of course, it's very interesting to have 45 randomly selected citizens and 50 members of parliament, so 60 people in a room. But how do you connect all that work to the 1.2 million inhabitants in Brussels? So we had some media coverage, but still media are more focusing on the design than on the topic. And there's still this question of what do you do with the recommendations? Do you go for an Irish model, for example, with a referendum at the end? Or do you think deliberative democracy is strong by its design and you don't need the link with the Maxi Public? But at least it's important to think about how you link the Maxi Public, but also the civil society. You don't need to act as if you were starting from scratch and there was no civil society. So it's their allies, basically. And they might see citizen assemblies as a threat because they're basically also contacting politicians with recommendations. So it's very important to involve them in the design, but not only throughout the process and when it comes to the recommendations. So I've spoken enough, I think, and I'd be glad to answer to your questions during the Q&A. Thank you very much. And I would be glad to hear more about Bogota and Milano now.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you very much. It was very, very complete presentation. And I also remember that this experience was awarded with a special mention of the IOPD like 2 years ago. So really, it's very, very interesting, these committees with politicians and citizens randomly selected. I think it's very, very interesting. And you have also some years of experience, so you can have this evaluation and this background. Okay, so before moving to the next presentation, if anyone has a very specific question to Jonathan about the experience of Brussels, is the moment. You can pose a specific question. If not, we can move to, in the end, we will have also the different moments for questions, more general questions. Okay, if no one's want to jump right now, we can move to the next presentation. So we're gonna move to Bogota, and we'll have María Alejandra Victorino Jiménez from the Extituto that she's going to present the experience from Bogota.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here sharing with dear colleagues as Jonathan. I'm so happy to know also new cases as Milano. And María Alejandra, as you say, Adrian, thank you so much for having me here. I want to share with you some key points about the itinerant citizen assembly in Bogota. Maybe you can move on. This citizen assembly was designed by civil society organizations as Extituto, as IDEMOS, founded by Felipe Rey and Indira La Torre, and Fundación Corona. And it's an enterprise foundation here in Colombia. And we together work with a Bogota Council in the capital city of Colombia for change the way that the council do the things. 4 years ago, we decided to create a citizen laboratory inside of the council. And part of this innovation in this institution was seeing how we can share or more complement the take decision in the council with the citizens. And we designed many different strategies of participation. However, one of most successful was the citizen assembly. So we started in 2020, and during the last 4 years, we were doing this exercise inside and also with the counselors in the laboratory. And this assembly is maybe one of our very interesting examples. I want to move for the next. Thank you. We implement 3 citizen assemblies in the last 4 years. This is the first citizen assembly in Colombia, one of more of the first citizen assemblies in Latin America, and we are very happy to say that we are the A case of institutionalizations towards deliberative democracy for the OECD and the Global South. I think that it's very interesting of our model that we work based on a mixed governance model. It means that it's not just citizen assembly based on an institution. It is all the time learning about civil society organizations, and we work together, and that's the way that the assembly works in Bogota. During these last 3 years, we have 240 members in our assembly, and I want to explain or focus on some key points that I think that are very interesting of how it works in Bogota. The next slide explains maybe the general model as well. It works in assembly. First, we prioritize. This word is so hard for me. Prioritize the topic of our assembly, and sometimes it's hard question how you can decide the topic in your assembly, and how you can do it with the legitimacy that you wait or hope for this exercise. In our case, in our governance model, mixed governance model, it's a decision between the councillors, the civil society organizations that we are spared in participation process, and also what is going on in our city, what is the main agenda in our city. So we ask also to experts in citizen agenda in Bogota. Then we call for citizen. The first and second assemblies was virtual because we were in pandemic situations, so we made it online sessions of assembly. The last one was a physical place with people. That was very excited, of course, but the call for citizenship was an effort between a lottery enterprise that helped us to make all the design of the population that could participate, but also the councillors call directly to the people to invite them to participate in our assembly. The training process, it depends also to the topic of our assembly, and was divided between in commissions. It means that between each iteration of the assembly, we had different type of topics I want to show you later. However, inside each assembly, people deliberate of a specific topic, even a specific topic of the main topic of the assembly. For example, in the second iteration of our assembly, we work of territorial plan of Bogota. And this territorial planning was divided in different chapters. For example, gender or environmental topics, etc. So people was divided in commissions inside the assembly to work on a specific or little topic of this big plan of the city. So the training was focused on specific topics and main topics of the plan of the city. The deliberation process is also divided in two moments, the plenary and the commissions. Commissions very specified in their topic, and the plenary to share the ideas or the proposals or the results of the deliberation and how you can make a big recommendation as assembly together. And then maybe the most important and very difficult part of an assembly is the systematization and advocacy. Definitely is the part of many people is thinking how we can do the best, especially with advocacy. So indeed, we work with the councils, with the councillors, with the council. It's so hard to measure how they use our recommendations in the assembly and how it can be put in a public policy decision. So the systematization is quite important. We have a very good training team to take notes and to translate the participation of the citizens in public policy documents. For example, in this case, we say that is kind of traduction of what is the citizens saying, what are their proposals or recommendations, and how they can put it in specific parts of the public policy document. For example, in this case of the plan, in each article of the big plan that you can imagine passing discussions in the council, the assembly have to do the effort of understand in each part of this public policy document, where are the recommendations clearly possible to implement. So it's a very technical and specific exercise, and I think that we can to focus on this last part of the assembly, of the advocacy, and how we can systematize and also traduce the recommendations of the city. Next, please. I want to talk with you about 3 key points. I think it's very important in our assembly. First one, itinerancy, what it means and why we decide to do itinerancy in our assembly. Second, advocacy, definitely some key points about it. And institutionalization, because we think that institutionalization is very important to sustain the exercise in the time of this effort. So what about itinerancy? You can move on to the next, please. Thank you. What it means? It means that the citizen assembly have different chapters, and in each chapter we have different purposes, but they are connected one to the other. So in itinerant citizen assembly of Bogota, each chapter was focused on a different purpose. The first one, for example, was focused on explore objectives of a big public policy in planning, urban planning. The second one, when the mayor present this urban planning process, we understand or promulgates recommendations for this big policy. And then the assembly was focused on evaluate all this process of the planning, urban planning in the city. So each chapter, different purpose or objectives. And in each chapter, we can see a learning process in the citizens, because in the first part, they decide these objectives, for example, and the second part, they take the information of the first chapter to again start with decision or recommendation of citizen recommendations, they deliberation, and in the third chapter, all this learning process of the first and second chapter was taken account for the new deliberation of new citizens. However, not is just about the objectives of these chapters in our assembly. The unique thing that I want to show you in terms of itinerancy. The next, please. It's also about the participants. So as you can see in this graphic, the first chapter was focused on 100% of people selected by lottery. However, in the second chapter, we decide to explore a new way to select the people who participate in our assembly. And we decide that 20% of the people of this second chapter could be confirmed to the first chapter. What it means that the people who participate in 20 and 20 again participate in 20 and 22, 20 and 21, and these people qualify the deliberation process inside of the commissions because they already know how it works, and they already know how it works, the deliberation and the results of the first deliberation. It doesn't mean that we don't have in this iteration and representative population or part of representative population of Bogota. We take in account that this 20% is also respecting these gender or socioeconomical criteria that are established in the representative selection or random selection population. And then in the third chapter, we had, I think that it's hard sometimes to dealing with the politicians, because they also say that they want the civil society, organized civil society, participate in this kind of exercise. And one thing, or I think a challenge of us designing citizen assemblies is how to say or explain that people, it's randomly selected. I don't know if my colleagues also think in the same way, but it's hard to the politicians accept this idea, no? So in the third chapter, we again change the way we do the selection process. So we have 60% or 5% of lottery, 20% of itinerant people, and 50% of people who are interested in this exercise, and again is registered by their decision or intention of participation. So itinerancy is in two ways, not just the connection between chapters, it's also about who is participating in our assembly. Next one. In advocacy, I want to show you also two ways of advocacy, I think. The first is how you can promote that the politicians, or in our case, councillors, use the reports of the assembly. In our case, 7% of the councillors say that they use at least 20% of the citizen recommendations. It means that they usually don't use all the recommendations, and it depends of each agenda of each politicians what they use. So you can try to imagine campaigning process of advocacy, because each politicians have a own agenda, and we have to present to each one what is the most important according with the agenda. So I think that it's a very interesting learning process during this part of the exercise in the advocacy. But also the advocacy is reflect in the citizenship. We have a very poor results of perception or good will of this institution in our city. And after the assembly, people say that they could be trust or have a good image of this corporation or institution because they felt that they were listened by the people, by the politicians, and their recommendations were taken account. And in this case, we measure that people felt more engaged with the problems of the city. So for us, the advocacy is not just only inside of the take decisions of the councillors, it's also about how people change the mindset about or their perception about the institutions and democracy process. Next one. The institutionalization, we think that it's in 3 levels. First one, in the institutional level, that it means that this assembly is part of the councilor's plan or the council plan, institutional plan for the last 4 years. But also you have to gain in other scenarios of institutionalization. First one, how you can involve the politicians in the process. In our case, they were just involved in the training process as experts, sharing with other experts, academic experts in different topics about assemblies running. So that is very important to involve them in the process, in the part of you think, and the civil servants, people who work in the institution. It's quite important. They were trained to help us in the deliberation process. And I think that it is quite important because these kind of people, civil servants that don't change 4 years, even 4 years, are the people who maybe want to defend, in this case, the assembly process inside of the institution. Last one, please. I think that I want to share some lessons and political recommendations in this case. First one is political will. Saves the word for me. And you have to learn how to hack these scenarios. If you have, for example, in our case, in the council, a president that help us, it's so the commitment with this exercise, and the next year change, the leader of this institution don't want to work with us, don't want to assembly process, how you can imagine hack these political intentions that change every time. Citizen assemblies do not have a single design, and I think that it's the powerful thing that we can share. You can adapt it to your context, to your necessity, and also it means that you have a negotiation process between the institutions, the citizens, the civil society organizations, and you that maybe are organizing your own exercise. And also, I think that the assemblies need another kind of understanding of the politicals of the institution about the participation. It means that it's not just take recommendation of the people and maybe say that they do something with that. It's also about give up a little of power and give power of people to take decisions. And it's so hard to understand. So I think that these 3 points are quite important to you if you are designing an assembly process. And also I want to say that advocacy is so hard to measure. It remains how to guarantee participation and generate ownership of this exercise. What it means, it's not about just María Alejandra receive the recommendation, systematize and give all this information to the politicians. It's also about how we can promote that the citizens that participate in our exercise of assembly represent this interest and help us in the advocacy process. Because I think that this part of the process of advocacy legitimates more our participation and give legitimacy to the citizen exercise. Also, I think that maybe in some cases, assemblies looks like a competition of the representative system, and for us, is more a complement. And how we can obviously open more spaces for the citizens' decision making, but it's not a competition of the representative system or electoral system. And I think the last one, the success of the citizen assemblies is the multi-stakeholder work. It's possible. It means that it's not about this institution changing. It's also about civil society organization helping them to transform the way they work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, María Alejandra, for all this presentation, and also congratulations for the very important work you're doing. And it's, yeah, I think it's very important this mention to the power and not the competition. Finally, exactly, it's to complement the democracy with better tools. No, I'm going to ask you also if any one of the participants want to ask a very precise questions on this experience to María Alejandra. If not, again, we can move to the next presentations, and at the end we'll have the debates and the questions. Okay, so we can move to Milano. So I will give the floor to Christina Paci and her colleague also from the city of Milan. Christina, the floor is yours.
Hello, I want to thank everybody for inviting us here. I'm Christina Paci, and I'm the coordinator of the Citizen Assembly on Climate in Milan. Here with me, there is my colleague, Sara Copelli, and she's working on the assembly as well. So we are going to do our presentation jointly. Next. I'm going to give you a bit overview of the city of Milan. Milan is located, of course, in Europe, in North Italy, and is the second biggest city we have got here in Italy, and is quoting around 1.5 million of people, but is located in a very dense populated area. So actually the metropolitan area of the city is almost double than that. The city is divided into 9 municipalities, and each municipality is counting more than 100,000 people in each of them, and they have got even political representatives and somehow a sort of political autonomy in managing the directions and their political decisions. In any case, our citizen assembly is working at a central level. So it works in the full city of Milan. Next. The Citizen Assembly of Milan has got some specific feature. The first one is that is relating to the climate and air and climate plan of the city. So it's dealing only with a specific topic, which is ecological transition, and is permanent as long as is relating to this plan, which is our Piano Aria Clima, and so is contributing somehow to reaching the targets of our air and climate plan, and is lasting until 2030. So I saw that even Brussels and Bogota were talking about permanent and institutionalized assemblies. Also it is, but just until 2030. The Citizen Assembly is working inside this plan, so is dealing with some specific topics covered by the plan. So is energy transition, is mobility, is use of the city water, is behavioral of citizens, civic participation, and so on. One area of this plan is dealing with the citizens in general terms, and is working towards creating a more a city which is more able to make choices which are aware of the ecological implications. So there are inside this area several actions that we are carrying out, and one of these actions are actually 8 specific actions. One of them is the Citizen Assembly. And so it meant that is being institutionalized within the Air and Climate Plan, but at the same time, it means also that the citizens which are taking part in our Citizen and Climate Assembly will work on this specific topic. Next. And Sara.
As Christina mentioned, the assembly is permanent until the end of 2030, because the goal is to accompany the implementation and evaluation of the air and climate plan. And one of the goals is to involve citizens, to let them express their voices and their opinion on the strategy that the municipality is carrying on with the plan. the composition, it's formed by a number of 90 citizens, and there is a turnover year by year. The citizens are drawn by lot, and the statistic office help us with the selection of the citizen to guarantee inclusion and diversity that can represent as better as possible the city. And we based our selection on criteria that also Brussels and Bogota mentioned as gender, economic situation, residence in the city. And the goal is to train them on the specific topic of the plan, and push them to build a recommendation and suggestion to improve the plan. The municipality is committed to respond timely after each year, producing an official document that actively involves all the recommendation. It has been designed in 3 phases. Now we are in the phase 2. The first phase started after the plan, the validation of the plan in 2022 with the constitution of the first citizen group. Then last year we started with the pilot year of the permanent assembly, and now we started with our full-scale activities. We are planning and we are doing different meetings through the year, where the citizen can be trained on a specific topic. Last year, they touched 7 different topics, and this year we are working just on 5 related to the plan. And they have time until October to deepen the theme and then propose a recommendation or proposal. And in the 2 last months, the municipality has to produce their response. We also have created a small video, so now I would like to ask Elisa if she can reproduce it. And it's a narrative of what we did last year. Thank you. Thank you. And the process, of course, involve both some technical people from the municipality that can give technical information about the topic, and also people from administration that can clarify how is the strategy and the next step described in the plan. We also trying to involve different stakeholders to broaden the voice of the city and to give a citizen the information of what is going on and what action are already putting in plans in the city. Next. There are some lessons we learned from the pilot year. One of the biggest challenge was to have a good representativeness of the citizen. We found out that the sensitivity level on the topic should be considered as well. We have variety of people. Some people are more into the topic, they have different backgrounds. Some people are new to the topic, so the training part is really important. And on the representativeness, the difficulties is most on the youngest bracket from 16 to 20, because it's really hard to involve that fraction of citizen. And last but not least, the dropout rate, it's high. We are around 20%. That from the literature is normal, but both from last year and this year, we are on this value. The engagement of citizen, it's another important lesson we learn. Some of them give us feedback on their feeling or not being indispensable of for the success of public policies. So we are trying to keep going with the design to training them more and involving them more in the building of a proposal. They are guided by facilitator and people from public administration as well. Since we are involving also people from that are not confident with Italian language, there are some difficult to understand the most technical part, and there are also some relational difficulties that emerge. And another lesson is the design of activity. The first year we settled a bi-monthly frequency, but it was insufficient because people asked for more training, more involvement, and more activities that it's hard to combine with the work schedule and work time of the municipality team. And also we plan to structure a dedicated time to hand over what the people of 2023 did to pass the ball to the citizen of 2024. And then we're still working on plurality of voice, as I said before. So we want to broaden the training to multiple stakeholders. Next.
I'm going to sum up with the last few political recommendations regarding our citizen assembly. The first one is the recruitment phase. As Sara said, we are running around having the 20% of dropouts, and we think that the recruitment phase is essential to reduce to a minimum this number. It also gives us the possibility to meet the people while we are enrolling them into the assembly, and to be sure that they have understood the role they are going to cover in the next following months, the time of engagement we require for them, and even the needs that they can have, like for instance the need of covering for a babysitter or somebody taking care of the older people, or transport cost and covering some extra expenses they can have in order to take part in our assembly. So we think that this part of the recruitment is particularly important in giving to all of us the possibility to have running a successful citizens assembly. Another aspect that is we think is very important is the dialogue between the governance and the government, the municipal activities, and the assembly itself. So to be able to be efficient and to strengthen the efficacy of the citizens' recommendations, it's the needs is to be aligned somehow to the work carried out by the public administration. So what we are trying to do now is not only to work with the citizen assembly in order to develop and to make a new recommendation, but also in monitoring the older one and facilitate their own implementation. So we are covering and supporting also the implementation of the suggestions and the proposal of the citizens coming from the previous year. And this is possible because, being permanent along the time, it's giving us the possibility to follow the activities for several years. Another aspect is that we think, and we saw even in practice, that there is a link between dropout and the most fragile part of the population. So we think that it's important to support the weaker people, giving them extra services like translation. We want to support the migrant population that in Italy is around 22-23%. I mean, in the Milan area, it has got these numbers. So we need to support them. We need to offer in some services also for people that maybe have stopped their learning acquisition several years ago, and they don't know much about ecological transition or climate issues. So for all these kind of people, we try to putting forward several activities able to enable them to be empowered and to support, as I said, these weaker groups. And the other aspect that we think it's important is the ongoing and continuous monitoring of the activities put in place. We saw that during the first pilot year, some aspects were needed to be modified, and we think that the same it will happen probably in the next following years, while other issues or other small project problems will come up. So the constant monitoring is another aspect that we think it's absolutely important to put under scrutiny and to take a specific attention. This is all from our side. If there are questions, of course, we are here.
Thank you very much, Christina and Sara. It was very, very interesting presentations, and also congratulations for the amazing job you're doing with this permanent citizen assembly. It's really a very important job, and also with a very important challenge that is the climate and the ecological transition. It's so important, and it's so important to involve the populations. Okay, so thank you all of you for the presentations. Again, I'm going to open the floor if anyone have questions or specific question. I also invite you speakers if you want to ask questions to the other speaker. Maybe to breaking the ice, I'm going to ask you two general questions that you can answer, any one of you. One is related more that you in some way you already mentioned, but it's the one question more political. It's the question of the legitimacy of this institution, no? Because sometimes there's some criticism about, okay, it's some random people that are selected. Why is the people are legitimate to be answering or representing all the population if they're not elected? So one question is regarding this criticism on the legitimacy. And the other question is more practical one. Some of you already mentioned, for example, Jonathan, regarding this right to have a leave day, no? So if we have to compensate in some way the people who are participating in the assemblies, maybe some remuneration, or just to paying the transport, or having the lunch, or having these free days. Maybe it's an interesting idea, not to have these civic days for like people be doing politics as they do, like if they're selected for a judiciary question. So I let these two questions, and I give you any one of you if you want to take the floor to answer about that. Maybe Jonathan, if you want to start, you were the first.
Yeah, in fact it's a very important question, and I must say we've seen an evolution here in Belgium when it comes to legitimacy of randomly selected citizens. Like when we started with the G1000 more than 12 years ago, people were perceiving the fact of involving randomly selected citizens as something like a hippie proposal, like something completely crazy that would not fit into our current political system. And I must admit that today it's not the case anymore. Like randomly selected citizens, they really have their legitimacy. And also, I would say it's also in Belgium, we have this big privilege of having access to the national register. So basically, in many citizen assemblies, you need to pay private companies in order to have access to data, in order to be able to do the random selection, which also it raises questions in terms of ethics, you know, when you are in a public institution buying data from your constituency, for example, it raises questions. And the fact we have this formalized partnership with the national register helps us also to target all of the citizens. For example, I spoke a lot with my colleagues in France, and I don't have something like that. So basically, they have only access either to private data or to the voters list. But if you organize citizen assemblies only with people that are voting, you miss the meeting and the opportunity to involve people that are not voting, who are probably even more interesting because they don't feel represented by the current political system. So I think this is very important. And then the fact of adding members of parliament to it, in fact, it is allowing us to have both legitimacies. The one, and I really liked what Maleja was saying also, not to oppose the traditional representative system to citizen assemblies. It's complementary. I think Milano said it as well. And so, in fact, we are adding to the legitimacy of elections, the legitimacy of random selection, which allows us to be representative of the diversity of the society. So my answer would be like, there has been an evolution, and this evolution is also increased by adding one legitimacy to another.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe María Alejandra, if you want to react.
Yeah, I think that it is not, I mean, when you are talking about legitimacy about random selection, you have two visions, the visions of the political institution and also the civil society organizations that say, what? I'm working during 4, 5, 10 years around this topic, and then you are saying to me that you are to choose random select people that maybe is not prepared, not interested, don't have any idea about this. And I was studying and fighting for my rights during the last 10 years. And in this case, we try to explain them that they can also participate in this process as training or in the training process, and help us to train to the people, random citizens elected, that maybe they don't have any idea, but they should have to idea about these citizen topics that are quite important for us. But also, it's interesting when they understood the idea that random selected as representative selection of the diversity of our city, that they also can help to that people or recruit people that is interested in to be organized. Sometimes participation is quite individual. And I think that the powerful thing in assemblies is that the people is talking and working in a collective process. And when you are doing this exercise of deliberate and also doing it in a collective, randomly selected, with selected persons, you maybe can be more interesting about these citizen topics and defend or fight for your rights, and who can help to you to organize the traditional organizations that also were working in these topics before. So assemblies maybe can help to promote the civil organization and more interest in civil or citizen topics. So these two arguments help us to also combine to civil society organizations why assemblies are powerful and random selected. It's interesting for them too.
Great. Thank you very much for your feedback. Christina or Sara, do you want to add something on that, or?
Well, I must say that I do agree with both Jonathan and Maria, but I would like to point out another aspect. For instance, here in Italy, the recommendation made by the Civic Assembly are not binding for the public administration. And so even if it's legitimate or is becoming more and more legitimate, the participation and even the creation of this kind of democratic institutions, at the same time, so they cannot really have an effort, an efficacy inside the local legislation because it is not binding. So is anyway left to the municipal structure to decide if they want to acquire or not the recommendation by the citizens. And this is a weaker point, but I mean, there is no way on the Italian legislation, even at local or national level, that we can do something different from that. So what we can do is simply work on a sort of a moral suasion with our political people or with the technicians working in the public administration in order to make and let becoming real the proposals, the opinion, the recommendation of the citizens. And so I think that this is an aspect important regard to legitimacy.
It is indeed, indeed, this point it's so important. Okay, anyone else want to add some questions or comment? Yes, Liane from Montreal, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. It's very, very interesting. And Christina, you talked a little bit of the dynamic with the public administration, and I'm curious to hear about this dynamic in Bogota and in Brussels. Do the public administration is cooperating, or it's difficult to engage the public administration in this process, and all the recommendation, how do they get in the regular administrative process, and how do you keep the traces of all the participation in the regular process, the regular administrative process? I'm not sure if I'm clear, but sorry, my English is not that good.
Jonathan or Maria, I give you the opportunity to answer.
Okay, I can just start. It's so hard to public administration have a commitment with this kind of exercise. We have two, again, possibilities sometimes. The first is that the politicians always want to do participation process because they say, obviously, it's citizens, people, electors. So it's super interesting for them that you propose that you can or you want to help them with a participation process, and they have to have the opportunity to meet new and more people and maybe be recognized for this participation process. But when you say, of course, yes, but this assembly is just for citizens, and you have to take in account the recommendations, this part is not so interesting for them because they want to visibility. So you can to negotiate. That's what I mean when I say that maybe you can do some forums to share ideas during the training process between the public or the public administration of politicians and experts and civil society organizations, because this participation process is like a big arena between different actors, and you are proposing more innovations, in this case, new people, random selected. So involve these politicians during any process is quite important. Second, for us in institutionalization, the part of assemblies, part of a institutional plan was the most important thing that helped us to the sustainability of this exercise, because the politicians can change this institutional plan. So your advocacy is focused on not just the politicians that help us to take in account the recommendations of the citizens. It is also about the institution. You can change, you have to change the institution, and the public servants are your best friends, for me, the best friends ever, that help you to promote this kind of exercise. In the third year of the last constitutional period, the president or the council said, I don't care the participation. I don't like participation. And we say, oh my God, it's the end of the assembly, all the laboratory, etc. But where the public servants that say, sorry, institutional plan say that you have to do, and we want to do, and they also move power inside of the institution. So I think that many times we are focused on politicians and decision takers inside of institutions and forget of institutional plans and public servants that help us to sustain our efforts, in this case of innovation in participation.
If I can follow up on that, it's very interesting, and it almost sounds like Maleja was in the room last week, because we had this conference of the organization FIDE, the European organization, the federation, and there were people from all around the world gathering in Brussels to discuss like the challenges that we were facing as practitioners or activists or thinkers when it comes to deliberative democracy. And basically we said we've been focusing a lot on decision makers, and this now we should maybe focus a bit more on the public servants as well. So it's quite interesting because it echoes exactly what has just been said. And so I think it's very important also to involve them, to train them. And I have an anecdote also related to that. You know, before we made the deliberative committees permanent, we had a pilot project on mobility in Brussels. The name was Make Your Brussels Mobility. And basically, probably because members of parliament were not involved, and it was not institutionalized, so it was an ad hoc project. At the end of the process, the minister and even the members of parliament had to push for him to come and to do a follow-up. But so he came and he did some cherry picking of some recommendations, and he cherry picked the recommendations that he liked because they were like the ones he was also favoring in his public policies. But so it could have ended there, but it didn't, because the administration, they decided to do something with the recommendations. And the new mobility plan in Brussels is the translation of those recommendations into like urban planning, for example. So it's very important to have them on board. And since we acknowledged that, so what we are doing during the follow-up, we have basically a table with 3 entries. We have, for each recommendation, we have what is the government doing, what is the parliament doing, but also what the administration will do or is doing or won't do because they are not doing anything on it. So I think it's key also when it comes to institutionalization to have them, because as I said, frontally, and it's also the way democracy is working, we have change in coalitions, change in people. So what is permanent is the administration. And so if they're more trained and also literate, I like this word, literate in deliberative democracy, it's their allies that really can help to improve and to have impact for the entire process.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the colleagues of Milan want to react too, or it's okay. Okay, maybe I think time is already almost finished, but maybe following a little bit this thread. It's regarding also not just the relationship with the political leadership and the administration, but also regarding the other participatory process. I think if you want maybe to go a little bit in detail about how we can connect these citizen assemblies with other like systems of, could be the participatory budgeting, or maybe the, I don't know, neighborhood councils, or different mechanism, no? Because we have always this logic of the ecosystem of participation, or the democratic system, no? And I think for sure the citizen assemblies or these deliberative processes are very important. And my question is, how is the opportunity to connect with the other mechanism of participation, in the case of the assembly in Milan, maybe with other participatory plans or following ups of the implementation of the transition? I don't know if you want to add something regarding this point.
Well, our citizen assembly is embedded within the municipality of Milan, so is already linked, just because it's inside the municipality, to other processes made by the public administration. Plus, we got an office, which is the Office of Participation, and this office is not running all the processes in the city, but is a sort of monitoring them, or facilitating some of them. And so through this office, we can be somehow linked to the other processes running in the city. The office is been made something like 7 or 8 years ago, and since then the knowledge and the know-how of the people about participation is increased a lot. We do also a festival of participation every year, in which for 3 or 4 days there are people coming and telling their experiences, discussing the topics, and taking part in several activities. All of this has made, I think, the city growing together towards gaining more know-how and understanding of what participation is.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'll speak now. I think it's a very good question, and it's a major challenge. So far, I have the impression we are handling a bit in silos, you know. There are the participatory budgeting people, there are the people that are more advocating for direct democracy, there are the ones advocating for citizen assemblies, and we all want the same, like, citizens' participation, and evolving from a system that basically is limiting citizens' involvement in putting a ballot in a box every 5 years, to having a say between elections. So we are all advocating for the same, but nevertheless, we are not working together. So I think we really should think about designing systems that are way more working together. I remember I was part of the design team in the Permanent Citizen Assembly in Paris. And there, for example, we were thinking, like, we should have a permanent citizen assembly, and that citizen assembly could also decide on the topics of the participatory budgeting. You could think, for example, that's the way we are doing it. It's a petition is leading to a deliberative committee, but afterwards you could have, and we are working currently on it, kind of, in Belgium, referendum are not allowed because the constitution is not allowing it, but you have non-binding referendum, and those could also go into an evolution of preferendum. So instead of having a binary yes, no, you could have different options. So, for example, different recommendations coming out of a citizen assembly, and the general public would have to rank them or to prioritize them. So you could think about different tools, because those tools, they are reinforcing one another. So I think it's a major challenge, and we need to think about working together to all those tools in order to improve what it is today to be a citizen in our democracies.
Yeah, so interesting question. I think that it's what it means when I say that the citizen assembly is not a unique way or straight way of design. You can adapt to your context or your necessity, and you can also complement with other kind of structures or designs of participatory process. it means that it's not just the possibility of assembly in any democratic system is not about just have an assembly of the unique way of participation in the citizen, but you can also do big strategies that include an assembly in their operation or implementation. I remember that Jonathan and I was sharing in New York City, in Columbia University, with some students of this university that present us a model that also have a game. Do you remember Energize? Do you remember, Jonathan? And they use the game, but also an assemblies, student assemblies, and many other mechanisms of participations inside of the university to take decisions of climate or environment process inside of the university. So it was so interesting to see this example because they used assemblies part of the bigger process inside of an institution. We in Bogota did the same in 2021 when the urban plan for Bogota was presented by the mayor's office. We imagined or designed a bigger strategy of participation where the assembly was a part of this bigger strategy. So I think that assemblies, it depends of the purpose as all in our life. What do you want to do with an assembly? It's not about do an assembly because it's a passion moment. The second wave of the deliberative democracy is about how the assembly can solve your problems and what are the conditions that you need to do an assembly works. So my invitation is also to reimagine the traditional design of the assembly, but also to question yourself if what do you need is an assembly when you are thinking do a participation process. Because I think that sometimes in this world that I work, of course, we are moving on tendency or fashion process, and we need to respond or answer for ourselves that it is work for what I want to do.
Thank you. Yeah, as you say, I think it's really important to decide really what we need to do and what we want to do with these instruments. And it's true that we move a lot with tendencies and these trends of, and it's true that it's a trend in the citizen assemblies and all this movement, and it's quite interesting, and it's also an opportunity, to be implementing and rethinking about the way we think in the governance in our cities. Well, I think we're almost run out of time, so I really want to thank you, all of you, Christina, Sara, María, Alejandra, and Jonathan, also for all your participants that join us today. If someone wants to make a final comment, final reflections, or final remarks, also if any of the speakers you want to make you want to share a final thought or anything. If not, I think we're gonna close here.
Well, I would like to thank everyone, Adria, and thank you very much for organizing this session and sharing all your knowledge with us, and expand our notion of participatory democracy, and shedding light on how we can move towards a more inclusive decision-making arena. And to tell you that all of these insights, we are collecting them. Elisa is helping us, working very hard in building up a paper, a peer learning paper that, of course, we're gonna share with you when it's done. So thank you very, very much for these inspiring insights and for sharing all your knowledge. Thank you.
Okay, so if anyone wants to say nothing, I'm gonna say thank you and have a very nice day, and see you soon. We keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks. Bye.
Thanks a lot.